Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Geographical Association's 2021 Compassionate Geographies Conference. We're delighted to welcome Simon Reeve for a compassionate chat with some of us GA volunteers. As we know, Simon, you're an adventurer and a New York Times best-selling author and TV presenter. At this stage, we think you've travelled to virtually every country in the world, making many award-winning TV series. All of us loved Caribbean, sacred rivers, Indian Ocean, pilgrimage, Ireland, Australia, Greece, Turkey, and Russia. And as geographers, we really appreciated the Tropic of Cancer, Equator, and Tropic of Capricorn. This summer, we all enjoyed Cornwall, a little closer to home. And in 2018, many of us followed your theatre tour. We're not surprised that the tour was extended 3 times due to popular demand and finished up with a night at the London Palladium. We're delighted you're here with us today. Your compassionate documentaries combine travel and adventure across the most beautiful and dangerous regions of the world, but you always bring an honest examination of environmental and social justice issues to us. So you should know, as well as all your TV appearances, you've also appeared in many a geography lesson. Simon, you're a great advocate for geography and certainly a compassionate geographer. We really appreciate your work in the past as a friend to the GA, especially your interview in Primary Geography a few years back. And we're delighted to have you here for today. So we have to ask you a few questions from our volunteers. Graham, who's a secondary geography teacher, former geography subject lead at Cardinal Newman Catholic School in Hove. Paula's a primary teacher and a geography education consultant and researcher. And I'm a lecturer in geography education at Dublin City University's Institute of Education. And like I said, president of the GA at the moment. So we're all educators and volunteers for the GA. And we have some really interesting questions coming up for you from the wider GA membership. So the first important thing to ask you, Simon, is how have you got on this year with no adventures?
It's been tricky. I don't think I've done brilliantly this last year. I've struggled quite a lot at times. I think I'd lied to myself, basically, that I'd be fine when my telly travels and adventures came to an end, but it was complete rubbish. I've been really bad at it. I've really hated having the right to travel, the possibility of travel taken away. And I do think that is partly because travel isn't just about going on a budget airline and sitting by a swimming pool. It's about exploring, it's about understanding, it's about having real experiences that sit in your heart and your soul and hopefully change your life. And I think it's very much part of what it is to be a human being. You mentioned one of the series I did was called Pilgrimage, which was really about the faith of people who walked and trekked long distances around the planet to sites, religious sites. But it was also about the fact that people have been traveling since the dawn of our species. We've been traveling forever. It's something that really defines us as a creature. We're everywhere. And I have struggled as a result when that's been taken away, like a lot of other people. I realize I am not a frontline worker. I am not juggling like you lot, educating the beautiful unwashed, but I am still a human being who has had one of his purpose and meanings in life taken away, and my life has contracted like lots of other people. But could have been a lot worse.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, thank you. It must have been really difficult. At the end, we want to ask you about your future plans. So it'd be nice to finish up this afternoon looking forward. So I'm going to hand over to Graham now.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously really well travelled, over 190 countries on your passport. Very, very impressive. One of the questions we've got is, what's the most amazing place that you've been to?
I would say Madagascar, as you're putting me on the spot like that, because it's so unlike anywhere else. It's been cut off from the rest of the planet, really, for a ludicrous length of time, a bit like the Galapagos in many a way, but on a much bigger scale. And life, flora, fauna has evolved there and developed there in slightly different ways to mainland Africa and to Asia, but drawing influences from both those parts of the world as well. So I would say Madagascar, but it has been completely hammered by deforestation, by poaching, rampant destruction of the ecosystems there. And so you do get that feeling when you're there. If only I'd been able to go there 100 years ago, it would have been more spectacular. Yes, it would have been, but it's probably a lot more spectacular at this rate than it will be in 20 or 30 years' time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Another question that we've got, which follows on from that slightly, is from Sarah, and she says, "What is the most worrying situation that you have been in?" We've seen quite a lot of those, I think, on various travel programs, including the one most recently, where you're looking back on some of your travels.
Well, thank you for the question, Sarah. Reminding me of terrible moments. Yes. I think worrying, it wasn't terrifying, but it was worrying. And that was walking into basically a drug den in a township area of South Africa, just near Cape Town. So it was a pretty troubled area that we were in. And we were traveling around the Indian Ocean, as you do. And we'd only really just started, and I was with people I knew and trusted, and hopefully I thought that they would trust me. And we were in this township talking to people about a strange drug that had been appearing there. And somebody literally said to me, "You need to go and talk to the crazy man down the street." And I got a little bit carried away and thought that was a brilliant idea. And so we went down the street, and because I tend to lead my little team in situations like that, I'm literally in the front and they're behind, trying not to trip over things while holding a camera and sometimes a sound boom as well. I feel like very much I'm at the tip as well. I'm the point man. And we walked into this house, and there were people passed out because they'd already overdosed on drugs by the side. And I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, I am taking the guys in somewhere that we haven't had a chance to check out, that is potentially really dangerous. And there were armed gangsters in there. And I had to be very sort of polite and harmless and British, which I like to think I do quite well. And then I had to sort of politely get us out of there as well. But it was a situation where I thought, oh, I'm going to get into such trouble with the guys if it all goes horribly wrong here. So it was very worrying in that sense, but we made it out okay. And ultimately, I honestly do believe the world is a much safer place than media folk like me usually let on. And the newspapers will tell you it's a much more safe and welcoming place. And my job is sometimes to go out there looking for trouble and danger. And even then, it doesn't always appear. Generally, most people are wonderful and welcoming. And I think that's a great untold story about the planet, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, because there's a nice link. You mentioned about walking. The next question we've got is from Anthony. And he says, footwear is always important on journeys. I really worry about your shoes, Simon, as they do not always appear to be very stout. Question, do you have very strong feet and ankles?
That I have never been asked that before, Andrew, and I would like to say I appreciate that question for its unique appeal. I do not think I do have very strong feet or ankles. Actually, I had a nasty incident at a barbecue a few years back where I was trying to encourage my son to get involved in a piggyback game, and I had admittedly maybe had one or two beverages of an alcoholic variety, and so I thought it would be a brilliant idea to chuck my wife on my back and run around somebody's house you get the general picture. It didn't end very well. I was quite astonished how rapidly a severely sprained ankle can swell up. It was really quite amazing. We had to cut my trainers off. So I do like to think I wear stout footwear, but I do need footwear that handles all situations. And although I think your question might be slightly tongue-in-cheek, I am taking it seriously. And we have basically the kit we have with us. It has to be adaptable for almost any situation, or as many situations as possible. And footwear and my boring clothing it's very functionally important, because I need to be able to walk from a jungle, sometimes literally into a palace. I mean, it's quite ludicrous sometimes. And I need to be able to look vaguely appropriate in that situation. I realize sometimes I do look like dog pulled backwards through hedge. Okay, but the footwear's got to handle that. So good waterproof, semi-stout footwear, but not army boots, because they can get you into trouble when people start thinking you might be a mercenary. That can end very badly.
Very good, thank you. Going to hand over to Paula.
Thank you. Hi, Simon. Thanks so much for being here. It's really lovely to have you.
Hi, Paula.
I was just looking.
Nice to see you.
Hiya. Thank you. I was looking at the interview you did for primary geography, if you remember that, and I could not believe it was 2015, all that time ago. I know, it was a great interview. Anyway, I'm going to start off with a question from David Fellows and Helen Cox, and they ask, it's a two-parter.
Okay.
Did you enjoy geography at school? And what do you think is important for young people to learn about geography?
David and Helen, thank you. No, part one, in truth, didn't enjoy school much at all. I'm not a great advert for the education system, but I think largely because I didn't embrace the opportunities and the options that were put in front of me. I went to a perfectly okay school. I come from a perfectly okay, loving family, but I fell quite a long way through the cracks in my early and mid-teens. I struggled a lot, mainly up here, mainly with my head health. And I spiraled down into a very dark place. By the time I was 12, I was having quite a lot of counselling from what we would now call CAMS, I think it is, isn't it? Child Mental Health Services. And I had that a lot, and they sort of kept me afloat. But I wasn't listening. I wasn't following school. I was getting drunk. I was doing all sorts of naughty things. And I was hopeless and helpless and lost. And schooling full stop was not something I embraced at all. And it's enormous shame because I had inspiring teachers who I remember now, but still sometimes you cannot force a human being always to do something they do not want to do. They have to find it within themselves, and I didn't. So I regret greatly. It's probably one of my great regrets in life is not following through on any sort of education properly. I flunked out of school without any real qualifications. I didn't go to university. I've had time. I'm old enough to regret other things as well, but certainly I regret my failings educationally. What do I think is important for young people to learn about geography? Goodness, that it's sexy, that it's interesting, that it is absolutely critical to our lives, our existence, and our planet, and is becoming ever so more important as the months and years tick by, because in my view, geography is really the story of us. It's about human beings and the planet we exist on. And it is that, in that sense, it's not a niche subject at all. It is one of the absolutely key stories about what it is to be a human being and what it is to exist on this beautiful, incredible planet. And that has, there might have been a time when we thought that all that mattered was earning money or getting a chemistry background or becoming an engineer. Now more than ever, those things are two of them anyway are important, but what's massively important is we think about what it is to be human and our interaction with planet Earth and our impact on it. And nothing could be more important now. It's not just a climate crisis, it's a climate and conservation emergency. And I think geography is one of the few subjects that really directly and beautifully addresses those catastrophes.
Well, that is a wonderful answer for kind of capturing the power of geography. So that's great. And you've nearly, or perhaps entirely, answered the next question as well, Simon, which was from Rebecca Murray and Naomi Sharland. And they asked, would you recommend it as a subject for young people to study now, and why? So,
Rebecca and Naomi, wasn't it? Well, I think, I think box ticked with the previous comments. I think it's absolutely essential. And I think, I think it's almost something that needs to be raised at a government level, that the government needs to somehow take the reins and make it clearer to students and the wider population, in fact, the absolute necessity of us having not just a core cadre, but a healthy number of geography academics and educators who can convey to this generation, next generations, the critical importance of it as a subject and what it says and tells us about this earth we stand on.
Oh, absolutely. That's fantastic. The next question is from me. I was lucky enough to get my question in. And it's this: you are so compassionate in your encounters with people and places. I think is it Jahangir in Bangladesh? I know I had a tear in my eye too. That was very powerful and moving. How important do you think it is to uncover these more emotive aspects of people and places in geography?
Well, I think thank you for the question, Paula. It's really interesting. I think it's a really helpful way of us humanizing the narrative, if you like, of geography. It relates it to what matters most to almost all of us, which is about human beings and us. And I think it's a brilliant way of making people realize why geography and the story of geography really matters, and the impact that the wider geography subject matter covers. I'm reminded as well, they did a study, it's slightly tangential, but I think hopefully Paula, who's asked the question, will see. There was a study done in the States maybe a decade or 2 decades ago, where they realized that if you have a charity advert in a newspaper and you've got the options, you can say Jahangir, age 9, age 10, works in a glass factory in Bangladesh. He needs your help to go to school. You will, if you can keep it to one person, if you can personalize it like that, you will get something like 5 or 10 times as many donations as you will get if you say there are 1 million children in Bangladesh who need your help to go to school. So it's a massive difference. And there's even a massive difference compared to if you say Jahangir is one of 1 million children in Bangladesh who need your help. So as soon as the numbers and the scale becomes too overwhelming for the majority of people who are reading or watching or listening or whatever, they start to lose their connection to that issue. And I think it probably applies maybe in lessons as well, maybe in some other, not that we should compromise all the time, not that we should dumb everything down to, Tommy the tarantula needs your assistance, although that is why charities do it. That's how they tug on the heartstrings, by making it individual and making it personal. So I think we focus in on individuals because it personalizes and explains the story, and ultimately then we do then as well admittedly then say Jahangir is one of 1 million. We can afford to lose the donations because we're not a flipping charity and we're trying to inform people, but we use the individual to widen to make the story wider. So I think absolutely make the stories emotive, make them real, make them aggressively, beautifully emotional, definitely, because that's the times we're living in. This is not a time for the bland and the beige. This is a time for emotion and concern and anger, I would say.
Thank you, Simon. My last question is from Emma Johns, and she says, what career advice would you give the teenage you about becoming an adventure travel journalist?
Oh, it's a lovely question. I wouldn't have listened. I was too far gone. I needed to bounce right down to the bottom before I could very slowly lift my way out of it. But I needed to find my own path, and I would have just ridiculed the notion. I had no aspirations, nothing like that. My big dream was to become a delivery driver. And I would have been pretty good at it. I was pretty good at working in a supermarket, I'll tell you, but I couldn't hack those jobs and hold them down. And I failed to get a job as a delivery driver. I was the only person who applied and they still wouldn't give it to me. So I just wouldn't have listened. I wouldn't have believed it. I needed, I suppose, in a way, to be living a slightly different life, and to, I think, have been given more responsibilities and interesting opportunities. I came alive when I got a job and I was in an adult workplace, and I didn't have massive responsibilities, but things were being asked of me and I could volunteer for things. That's when my life started to take off, if you like, when I started working as a post boy on a newspaper of all things. So I think I probably wouldn't have listened. If I'd been giving life advice to myself, I would have said, hang in there, it will be okay. It's not been too bad.
Hang in there. That's a good Good piece of advice to give. Thank you. I'm going to hand you over to Graham now for the last few questions. Thanks so much, Simon.
Cheers, Paula.
Sort of back to me again. So this is a question from Rebecca Murray, okay, and she says, what places have you enjoyed visiting the most? I know you've spoken about Madagascar, but I suppose what might be your really happy place, let's call it, that's the trend, isn't it, happy places, and then where are you planning to visit next, and why?
My happy place. Well, two sort of countries pop up into my head like flashing beacons when that's been asked. And one of them is Bangladesh, which I think is a beautiful and wonderful country, but more than anything, home to and populated by beautiful and wonderful people. And that makes it a very special destination, I think, very special place to travel in. It's poor, it's packed, it has enormous issues. It's fascinating for geographers, I think, because it's hammered from both sides by Mother Nature. People really, really struggle there. But I think often they're the best of us. They're funny and clever and witty and wise and humble and hospitable, and they're brilliant. So I love Bangladesh. And the other place is Greece. My wife's been dragging me there for years now, and initially I was like, I'm going where you want to go, and I've just embraced it because it's wonderful, and it's just at the edge, the end of the Mediterranean, as you're probably aware, and quite exotic though. It's just a relatively short trip away. You can get there by train. It's not fantastically easy, but it certainly makes for a more interesting adventure, and it's got still a real sense of itself and a culture. It's got everything it has. It's got the mainland, it's got the islands, but it's got all year round as well. Greek Easter and the ceremonies and services and celebrations of life that you see there are something to really experience. It does make you think in Britain, maybe we need a few more actually proper ceremonies and traditions really to bind us together as a nation. I do sometimes wonder that.
That's brilliant. I think in that answer you've covered a number of other questions that we sort of had as well. So that's brilliant. I'm going to pass over to Susan.
Thanks, Simon. Thank you for that. That's wonderful to hear your responses. So I'd like to ask you just one last question, Simon, which is, you see so much and you understand so much. You said at the beginning about traveling makes you understand the world and changes your life. So what when you look at everything that's happening around the world, what gives you hope for the future?
Us, I think, not just the lovely folk on this call, but wider humanity. I've got a lot of belief and love and faith in us. I don't hate us at all. We are quite evidently the most incredible creature that has ever existed. 4.6 billion years. And as we explore further, we find nothing that remotely matches for complexity, even what's between my two ears, which is astonishing. So us, I think, gives me great hope. I think our leadership troubles me greatly. I worry that we are just incapable collectively of thinking long term and taking the steps that needed to be taken for us to collectively live a much more sustainable existence on this planet. But I have great faith in us, and I am hopeful. And it's not just leaders that we have to turn to, but it's people like Greta, who's got a strong voice and needs to be listened to and says profound and deep things. I don't know how much I understand. I've seen so much, but I just have so many more questions. I have so many more things to discover. There is an infinite, endless number of stories to discover and issues to find out about on planet Earth, because there's always more human beings, and as a result there's always more adventures to have, people to meet, and questions to ask, and sometimes occasionally get answers. But yes, us collectively, my wonder and love of us does definitely keep me going. And I've been to some pretty dark and troubled places, but even in those dark places, it is humanity that I think shines the light the brightest. So we are wonderful. We needs to have faith. We need some proper long-term leadership, and we need to move much more radically, aggressively, and dramatically to mitigate our climate and biodiversity emergencies. But I believe in us. I really do.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Simon. So on behalf of all of us and the wider GA membership, I'd just like to say thank you for such a wonderful insight into your work. It was really kind of you to spend time with us today. And
not at all. I'm very honoured and delighted. Thank you. Thanks
so much, Simon. We look forward to your next adventures.
All right. Care. Best wishes to you. Best wishes to anybody watching. And thank you very much for joining us. And lovely to see you all. Okay. Bye, Susan. Bye, Graham. Bye, Paula.
Bye.
I'm off to Finland now. Virtually, not literally. Cheers.